Good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm, as always, your host, Rudy Robertson. Today we're back for episode, I want to say 280. That sounds about right to me. Welcome to the show. How about you introduce yourself and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, hi Brody. Yeah, people, I don't know, usually they don't know how to call me. Linkarzu is fine. My name is Christian, Chris, however you want to call me is fine.
Yeah, I was on your show 2 or 3 weeks ago now, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, I don't keep track of time, but something like that, I guess.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun when I was over there. And we mainly focused on sort of like what I was doing, right? You know, my journey on Linux, things like that. But I was kind of curious about the state of, like, you're like a macOS guy, and I haven't used macOS in so long. You're getting this interest in Linux as well, and I'm kind of curious, like, how all of that pieces together, like how someone who goes from being on macOS decides they want to start branching out into other things. The fact that you have such a very, like, you're a macOS power user, right? Like, you've got a much different environment than the average person would have just running macOS, like, just out of the box.
Yeah, I don't like the default macOS experience, the apps that you get by default, Finder, the bar at the top, what is it called? The dock?
Yeah.
The bar at the bottom, the one at the bottom, the dock, the bar at the top as well, the menu bar. I just don't find it really intuitive for what I do, actually, right? So I decided to customize it to my liking. I did a lot of stuff in macOS. I don't have any of the defaults, actually. I don't keep the dock visible. The menu bar is not visible. I replaced it with something else. And the NeoVim is something that I do a lot in macOS. So if you look at it, it's like you don't even know it's macOS. It's something strange. You think, I don't know, it's some sort of Linux distribution. I don't know, it's weird, but yeah.
I think the only thing that tells me it's macOS, like I've got like one of your video, just a random video open right now. The only thing that tells me it's macOS is the little Apple icon in the top left corner. That nothing else here at all.
Yeah, I left that there so people know it's macOS, right? Because you're watching a tutorial and you're like, okay, I'll do this. And then you realize, I don't know, 30 minutes in that it was not a Linux tutorial, but macOS. So at least so people get to tell, okay, this is not Linux, this is macOS, But I'm trying to make it more compatible with Linux right now, right? Because like you mentioned, I do want to give Linux a try. That would provide more content to me if I install Arch as a macOS user, right? So that's one of the videos that I have in mind. I already have a computer set up, one of those mini computers, I don't want to install it in a virtual machine because the experience is not the same.
Sure.
My key maps are not going to work, it's not the same. But I have a dedicated machine that I want to try it on, see how it goes. But one of the issues is incompatibility between the tools, right? Because I have a keyboard mapper in macOS. It's called Carabiner Elements. I do crazy stuff with it, right? A lot of stuff with Carabiner. Switch my scenes in OBS, switch between my TMAX sessions in the terminal, everything, with the keyboard mapper. But that is not on Linux. So my first step right now was to install another keyboard mapper, which is called Kanata, that I can use in macOS. And if that works, I can give it a try in Linux and see how it goes,
I do basically nothing special with my keyboard. This is an area I've never really looked at. Like, when I do want to do anything, like I've got a Elgato Stream Deck here. So for me, anytime I want to do, I want to control OBS, I want to do things like that, everything's just done through that. And then anything else that I do is going to be something for controlling the window manager directly. And that I can usually configure within the window manager.
Yeah. I like to keep that outside of the window manager. I could do it. Well, no, not with the one that I have because I'm using Yabai. and I don't think I can configure key maps in Yabai, but macOS has another window manager called Aerospace, in which you can configure key maps and you can do a lot of stuff. But again, that would not be compatible with Linux. I'm trying to keep everything Unix compatible. So if I switch between macOS or Linux, my experience is going to be the same, right?
Actually, let's talk a bit about Yabai, because I think a lot of people are kind of unaware that there are these like tiling systems available for macOS. Like, this isn't just a Linux thing nowadays.
Yep. There's actually a lot of window managers in macOS at the moment. The ones that I would truly consider window managers are just two, Yabai and Aerospace. The other ones, they offer you features like there's a launcher, an app launcher called Raycast in macOS that gives you window managing abilities, right? So it allows you to put your window on certain section of the screen, but that's not a window manager, right? But there are two specific ones that allow you to do basically window management. I don't know how it's done on Linux. I have never done it on Linux, so my first experience with window managers was actually in macOS, right? So Yabai gives you two modes. You can use it in BSP mode, which partitions the screen, right? Usual way.
Yeah, normal tiling stuff there.
Yeah, normal tiling. Or you can also have it in stack mode, which keeps one application on the screen at a time. That's the one that I use, one application on the screen at a time, at all times. So I just switch between my apps with keyboard shortcuts, right? So I need to go to my terminal browser, a keyboard shortcut for each one of them, and I just get there fast. I'm not a fan of tiles, and that's a discussion I have all the time in Discord with other people. Like, but why tiles? I'd say 2 tiles, 3 maximum, I guess, if you're really pushing it. But other than that, to me, it does not make too much sense. But that's just my personal,
Right, no, this is why I've kind of migrated away from a pure tiling model over to... I don't know if I talked about this when I was on your show. I'm using a...
Oh, yeah, the scrolling one.
Yeah, Neri. Okay, yeah. For anyone who's unaware of Neri, basically, rather than a regular tiler where you just have your monitor, your desktop, and it will basically split up that space into smaller and smaller squares, with Neri, with a scroller, basically you have an infinite horizontal plane, and the windows tile, but they don't keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It just expands across that space, so it sort of eliminates that issue. It creates other issues, don't get me wrong. Like, as I've been using Neri, you have to keep track of where the windows are, because if they're not visible, you might forget which workspace you had it on, because you have workspaces and also the scrolling. So it does require you to really think more about how you want your windows to be laid out, but when you have it in a way that makes sense, I do think it works really well. And I think one thing with the stacking, there are definitely tilers that do that. So that is a thing that is definitely replicatable on Linux, and if not directly with like a stacking system, a lot of tilers do have a tabbing system, which effectively works the same way, right? Like, it's one window full screen at a time, and then there are different tabs, and you can cycle between the tabs.
Yeah, that's one of the things. That's one of the differences in which I implement, my window managing workflow in macOS. Because I could have an app on each one of the desktop. The difference between the two window managers that are available is that Yabai takes advantage of macOS desktop environments, right? So it uses those. So you put your applications in the macOS virtual desktops, right? I don't like that. I keep all of the applications in a single desktop, and I just switch between the applications with a shortcut. I don't need to keep them separate, right? Because I'm using a stack mode anyway. So I just switch between them, and it's instant. One of the complaints that people have with Yabai is animations, right? Because macOS has these animations when you switch desktops. It's annoying. I don't like it. I just want to get to the app fast. I don't want to see any animations. I don't want to see anything, right? Just want to get there. So That's one of the complaints with Yabai.
Mhm.
In order for you to do that, the animations, you have to partially disable something in macOS, system integrity protection, so that it disables those
Right. Okay.
animations.
Okay.
And people don't like that. People is like, no, I'm not going to disable zip. If you keep all the applications in a single desktop, you don't need to disable it, right? On the other hand, there's another window manager, which is Aerospace.
Mhm.
The difference is that everything is virtual. It creates its own virtual environments. So it manages applications in those virtual environments. It moves them around, and you don't need to deal with macOS desktop, virtual desktops, actually. So it's
Okay.
an alternative, yeah.
Yeah, one of
And
the
it's the most popular one.
one of the key features I'm seeing here is doesn't require disabling the system integrity protection.
Yeah.
So wait, what is this system integrity protection thing actually doing?
I don't know. macOS just enforced some security
Okay.
things so that you cannot modify, stuff in the
Mhm.
computer. So in case that you do want to modify those things, you have to disable it. Otherwise, you can't. Security stuff that they implemented. I don't know in which macOS version they did it. It wasn't a thing. I think a long time ago. It is now,
Mhm.
but that's one of the problems with Yabai that you have to partially. You don't have to entirely disable zip. You have to partially disable it so that it can manage a few things like those animations, those hideous animations. It takes care of them. Like there's shadows in windows in macOS, right?
Huh.
Shadows that are built in on each one of the windows. You cannot disable those shadows, but with zip, if you partially disable it, Yabai can take care of those shadows. You don't have shadows in the windows anymore. Or transparency. That's one of the features that I like about Yabai as well. Since it can manage things at a deeper level, it can make whatever app you want transparent. And it does it at the window manager level, right? It's something that Aerospace cannot do, because it creates its own virtual environment.
You bring
So
it.
you have to choose what do you want. I'm using Yabai at the moment, but I'm creating a video about Aerospace. I'm going, with a Discord friend. We're going over Aerospace. He's guiding me through the process. And but yeah, you have to choose what you want, Yabai or Aerospace, basically.
Is it easy enough to switch between them? Obviously, you'd have to like reconfigure the one you're swapping to, but if you're using something like let's say you have a clean macOS system and you want to either use Aerospace or Yabai, is it difficult to get either of them working, or is it a pretty straightforward process?
If you're in macOS, you're not gonna know about window manager, so a lot of the concepts are gonna be really new.
Sure,
Like
sure.
move your mouse to the center. Why would you want to move your mouse to the center when you focus an application, right? Or transparency. What is that? What is tiling? So if you already come from Linux, simple, you just go to my .files, you grab my Yabai file. I have a lot of comments there. Everything is explained. I have guides. I have a blog post on how to install Yabai and all that stuff. And if you want to switch between that and Aerospace, it's not complicated. The only thing I have to do is disable Yabai so that it doesn't start at boot, and then open Aerospace. Aerospace is the one that's going to be taken over. So I can switch between the two. That's what I did in the video. That's what we're doing in the video, actually, switching between the two. Yep.
You the thing you mentioned there about animations earlier, hearing that from the Linux side is actually kind of interesting, because the lack of animations is one of the reason why Hyperland became so popular. So when people were swapping over to the Wayland side, the main window manager that was available is Sway, which is basically the Wayland version of i3, which is what like Aerospace is based on. But it's very simple, and the windows, they just immediately move. You swap workspaces, there's no animations, it's just immediately changed. And people in the Linux space really like to have the fancy, flashy animations. Like if you go back and look at the early days of Linux, people would do things like wobbly windows, where you grab a window and you shake it, it like wobbles around like jelly, or you close a window and it burns. So there's always been that sort of interest in having the extra flair. Obviously, not everyone. That's why things like Sway does exist. But Hyperland came along and it added the ability to have, flowy animations between the workspaces, so it like slides across, or you open a window, it like slides up from the bottom, or like, expands out and things like that. So, like, I don't know. For hearing that from the Linux side is definitely, it's an interesting, different perspective, I guess.
I think the problem with macOS is that the animation that they have to switch between desktops, right? So if you want to go to the desktop 1 to desktop 2, like the virtual ones, there's this, I don't know, 500 millisecond delay that happens when you switch between one or the other. And I think that's what people don't like.
Let's see if I can find
I have not experienced that too much, because I have them disabled all the time. I just want to get there fast. I have seen the animations in Linux, and as long as they're fast and smooth and they don't get in the way, I think they're fine, but I think the problem is with the Mac OS animation switching between desktops, it makes it slow.
Well, the nice thing as well with Linux is if the default speed isn't something you like, you can say, let's say it starts at 500 milliseconds. You could set it to 200. You could set it to 2000. Like, you just have that ability there to configure it and tweak it to the level that you want it to be at, and nothing's gonna stop you. There's no system integrity protection there. If you wanna have a 10-second animation every time you spawn a window, you shouldn't, but you could.
Yeah, I think you can configure the duration of the animations with the app. I haven't tested, I just have them disabled, and that's the way that I like it. I just want them to jump fast, I just want to get to the application. I don't want to see it, I don't want to, like they have the expose thing, right? When you bring all of the apps, I don't know if you've seen it, but you bring all of the apps to the front. That's the way that I used to manage my computer. And I want to touch on that a little bit, before doing all of this. The way that I used to manage my computer is I had a 52-inch TV, huge TV, a 4K
I've
TV.
had
that was my monitor.
4 different people on this show use giant TVs for their monitors, and every single person has a different reason for it. Before you go any further with that, can you explain why?
Because I thought, man, I'm not productive in this small screen, right? I had a bigger-sized monitor, 27-inch monitor, and I was like, man, this is not cutting it. I don't have enough space. I need more space. I need my Obsidian here. I need my Slack here. I need my browser here, and I need my email here, whatever, right? So that's what I did. And I had 4 different applications on the 52-inch TV, 2 desktops. So I used to switch, okay, my desktop 1 is for work-related stuff. Desktop 2, my browser, right? So I had my browser and other thing there. Desktop 3, and I had it organized that way. And I was like, man, this is peak productivity right here. And I spent like that for, I don't know, like 2 years approximately. But I started realizing that it was painful, man, because I had to use my eyes a lot. I had to go in and search. Okay, so where's Obsidian? Okay, Obsidian is here. Click on Obsidian. Where's the browser? The browser is here. So where's the other browser? It's in the other desktop. Let me switch to the other desktop. Click on the browser. Where is Slack? Okay, Slack is in the other desktop. Click on it. And it became a nightmare. I spent like that for a long time, and I was like, there must be a better way of doing this, because it was better because you have a lot of space and you can get to stuff faster in quotes, but I thought there must be a better way. So one day I just was watching, I don't know, a Vim video. I was like, okay, whatever. I'll give Vim a try for the 4th time because I hated Vim. Vim motions suck. And I was like, but it's not gonna defeat me. I'll try Vim one more time, one last time, and I'll make sure I get Vim and its motions. And I saw this guy, the Primogen, and he had his developer workflow. I don't know, the video is from 2020. I don't know, it's like 2-3 years old.
Sure.
Right? And I was like, he's captivating, right? Because, the way that he talks and all that. So I immediately became a fan. NeoVim all the way. But in that video, he explains how he uses his Linux computer, right? So he switches between applications, right? So with shortcuts. So if he needs to go to the browser, shortcut. Terminal, shortcut. Slack, shortcut. Everywhere, shortcut. So it's faster. And I was like, oh, how can I do this in macOS? So I started by using just a quarter of my 52-inch TV, right? Everything in a small section. I used Yabai. That's when I started with Yabai because I was like, okay, Primeagen has a window manager. What do I have on Mac? I have nothing. So I discovered Yabai, configured it. So I was using it just in a quarter of the screen, right? In a small portion of the
So you
screen
don't have
to
to use
get
it for
used to a small monitor.
You don't have to use it on your entire screen then.
Because you can configure padding in Yabai, right? So I configured a huge padding on the top and a huge padding on the left. So I only had a quarter of the screen and all of the apps were there. Because I didn't want to tell my wife, hey, you know what? The 4K TV was not such a great idea. Now I want a monitor, right? Because I needed to test first. So I spent like that for, I don't know, 3 months, making sure that it worked for me in that small portion of the screen. Once I realized, yeah, this is the way. Told my wife, I gave the TV to my mother-in-law. I think that was a great move, you know. Let's give the TV to your mom, and I can buy a monitor. No questions asked. Got the monitor. It's not an expensive monitor. It's just an Asus what monitor? I don't know what it is. Pro Art, you know, 75 hertz. Nothing special, nothing fancy, right? So I switched to the 27-inch monitor, I think it is, or 32, something like that. I don't know. And I've been using that method or that way of working ever since, you know, small screen, one app on the screen at a time, and I didn't look back.
I like how you say 27 or 32-inch small screen because you got so used to working in a 52-inch TV.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was
half my viewers are like laptop users on like 13-inch laptops. 27-inch screen is still a big screen.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Primeagen talks about, you know. The good thing about using Yabai in stack mode is that I can switch to my laptop. I just unplug the MacBook, I take it downstairs, and my workflow is exactly the same. The only thing I need to do is restart Yabai, you know, and I have a key map. If I type YAB on my keyboard, that's Yabai, you know, the chord YAB restarts Yabai, organizes my stuff to adjust to the smaller screen, and everything is the same, right? On the other hand, if I would have 2 or 3 monitors and I just switch to my laptop, would be a nightmare because my workflow would be completely different. You know, I edit videos sometimes in the bed or in the couch downstairs, right? So I just take the laptop, edit the video there, my terminal, everything is the same. So that's one of the reasons why stack mode is so important to me as well.
Yeah, one of the issues I see people bring up when using a tiler, especially on a laptop, is they find even just doing a single split, for some people, the windows get too small. I got used to it. Like, my first experience using a tiler was on a laptop at the time, so I grew to deal with it. I think it was a 15-inch laptop, so it was a little bit bigger. But I understand that. And when you are doing everything full screen like you're doing, that completely eliminates that problem. You just don't even have to worry about it then. Obviously the windows are smaller than on a 27-inch monitor, but being a full screen, like it's still going to be that full screen experience.
Yeah, and I don't have to worry about space or anything, you know. It keeps the exact same way. Yep.
So do you just use a single monitor now? You're like, and everything is just stacked on that single one, or do you have multiple monitors on your desktop?
No, single monitor all the time. I have my external monitor. That's the one that I use, and I have the laptop on the side, the MacBook, but it's always closed, right? Unless I have to record a video or stream, or well, I don't stream too much, you know. Record a video. I use the laptop as a monitor, basically, just to see what's happening in the recording.
Okay.
Everything is always on my main one. So the laptop is basically a monitor, but it's not part of my workflow, and I just um move all the apps that I don't want to show when I'm doing a video to that monitor, right? So in your buy, you can specify where do you want the applications to go. So I just want password, email, stuff like that to switch to that other, to the MacBook monitor, basically. Yep.
Right. I was gonna say, like, I can't even imagine going back to a single monitor for making videos. That sounds absolutely horrible. So, okay, you have the second one there, at least for doing that.
For videos, yeah. Yeah, I couldn't do it with well, I did it for a long time with the single monitor, the videos, but you cannot see what's going on,
Yeah,
right? So
I did it
that's
for a long time as well. It's just not pleasant to do. Like,
yeah,
if you
no.
never you never know if you're recording. You're always like a little bit worried that you're maybe recording the wrong thing, or you're on the wrong scene, or maybe you forgot to press the record button.
Yeah, I did add something to my bar on the top on macOS, which is called Sketchy Bar, that tells me which scene I'm on, right? So
Ooh, okay.
um, just to let me know, okay, so I'm on the main scene right now. I'm on the guest scene. I don't use it anymore because I'm using the two screens at the moment. But that's something that I did when I was doing everything on a single monitor. But yeah, it's not a good experience. That is um the exception for me. If it's video related stuff to monitors, you cannot go with one. You could, but it's too much. Yeah.
This That actually might be an interesting idea to mess around with on my side. Like, I actually adding like the scene I have to my bar. Like, I'll just have to connect to the OBS WebSocket.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
I'll play around with that. I don't know if I don't really need it, but it would be neat to just see if I can get something like that to work.
To see, yeah. I have a script in my dot files, which is the one that it's a Python script that I use to switch scenes in OBS. So you can grab it from there. But obviously, I use Sketchy Bar, which is the bar on the top. So yeah, that's only Mac OS. But you have, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of bars in Linux, and that's a question that I have. I have no idea on, like, does Linux come with a bar? Because at the top where you can see, okay, I have this battery left on the computer. This is my audio source right now. This is the microphone that I'm using, the microphone level. That's what I use the bar on the top, to give me useful information, not what macOS gives you, which is not useful at all, right? But in Linux, you have a lot of different bars at the top. Is that right? Or
Yeah.
is it depending on I don't know how it works.
So in like the major desktops, like in KDE, like in GNOME, things like that, where it's not just the window manager, it's a full suite of applications. They usually have some sort of bar included. If you're using a window manager like I do, some of them do have included bars, but most of them just rely on these third-party solutions. So in the case of Wayland, a very common one to use is called Waybar. It's a pretty standard bar. It's pretty easy to configure. It's not the most, I guess, not the most in-depth in how you want things to be laid out, but it's a pretty simple one to work with. If you are more of a developer mindset and you want to really make something custom, a lot of people have been talking about a project called QuickShell recently, where it's basically just the framework is there to make a bar, and you write everything in the in Qt, the like Qt UI language.
Okay. Yeah, the one that I use has two options. You can configure all the different items in Bash, which is what I do. You can add you can do whatever you want in there, right? But I use Bash, or it has a different option in Lua. The same developer created both options, Bash and Lua. I guess he uses NeoVim. Yeah, definitely uses NeoVim. So that's why the other option in Lua.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot more bars on the X11 side because that's kind of been around a lot longer. but on Wayland, we have a lot of options that are available. It's kind of just a matter of how you feel comfortable configuring it, I guess. Like, you can do a lot of stuff with all of them, but do you want to have a bunch of pre-made modules? Would you want to go and write a lot of stuff by hand to make it exactly the way you want it to be? It kind of depends on the sort of approach that you personally want to take.
Okay, makes sense. Good to know. All right. And that's something that I have been considering as well. If I'm gonna create a video about Arch, how to install Arch, because that's gonna get me some views, but I don't think I will do X11 because I'll be like in the 80s and an old, I don't know, an old man. So I think I'll have to go with, what is it, Wayland?
Yeah, Wayland. Yeah.
Okay.
I think for the window manager you'd want to use, I think Sway is like the most obvious choice because that is the Wayland version of i3, which is very familiar for what you've already been using. It's what Yabai and Aerospace are based off of. So that's a pretty solid option to go with. Otherwise, if you want to have a lot more sort of, not necessarily just visual customization, but just customization over the feel of the environment, I do think Hyperland is also a really good choice as well. Those are kind of the main Wayland window manager options right now. There are plenty of others. There's like little niche ones where they're, maybe like one guy works on it and they wanted to focus on a very specific kind of workflow. But I think messing around with either one of those two is probably going to be they're the most well supported, they're the most well documented, and there's a lot of plugins for them. A lot of people have done things with them already. So if there's something you're like, can I do this? Is there a way to make this work? In a lot of cases, someone's probably already tried to do that. It gives you sort of a baseline to build off of.
And what's the difference between Hyperland, you said? No, Wayland, and what's the other one you just Sway? Is that
so Wayland and X11, those are just the different protocols used basically to build the environment. Sway and Hyperland are two window managers that are available using the Wayland protocols.
Okay, and the difference between Sway and Hyperland, if I want to use stack mode, you say Sway would be like the best option for me, right?
Sway is the Wayland re-implementation of i3, and Yabai and Aerospace are both based off of i3. So it's like the most logical step to go with. You're basically just using the thing that you're already kind of comfortable with anyway. Yeah, the only reason I don't immediately recommend Sway is it tends to be fairly conservative in adding new Wayland functionality, and we're still seeing a lot of heavy development, new features being added, sort of trying to iron out a lot of those issues during this transition process from the old X11 into Wayland. Hyperland tends to be quite a bit faster in adding new things, so it's not like you necessarily need a lot of the new things being added. A lot of the core groundwork is there for a completely usable environment. It's just there might be some things where maybe you notice there's something which doesn't play exactly nicely, and that's gonna have a new feature added to it quite a bit faster.
Okay.
Okay,
makes sense.
One example is there still isn't really a great way to do so with OBS, how you can not be focused on the window and you can press whatever your keybinds are and control the window. You can use a global hotkey system for that. That's a thing that exists on macOS, on every system. Wayland, there's still a work in progress to getting that specifically working, but with OBS, because there is the WebSocket stuff there, you can work around it.
I have a question there.
Yes.
The keyboard mapper that I use is Kanata, right? So from Kanata, I do everything. So Kanata calls a script, a Python script, that script changes my scene. So if I leave that out of the way, I wouldn't have issues, right? So if from Kanata, which is my keyboard mapper directly, I interact with OBS, I think I wouldn't have a problem, right?
Yeah, how does the script work? Does it just call the WebSocket to control it? Is that...
The script is called what did I name it? Let me see. Scene switch underscore scene.py in my .files,
Ah.
right? So I just call the script. I pass the scene name as an argument. I can do it in an authenticated or not authenticated way because I retrieve the password from 1Password. But I just disable that because Kanata and 1Password were not getting along each other well. So I pass another argument, no auth, so that it does not require a password. Of course, I have authentication disabled in OBS, right? So
wait, where are the... Oh, wait, hold up. Scene switcher? Switch scene dot...
yeah, switch scene dot
Cool.
py. Yep.
Oh, yeah, it's OBS WebSocket stuff. Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, all you would end up doing there is you would just be able to run the keybind from Hyperland.
Yep.
Hyperland can just do that, or if you want to use some other system, maybe to run the keybinds.
Okay, yeah, Kanata is the one that I'm planning on using because I already have everything. Well, I'm setting up Kanata right now.
Is that a thing that exists on the Linux? Oh, it is a thing on the Linux side.
Yep.
Okay.
It's macOS, Linux, and even Windows, so...
Hold on. Is it It might just be an X11 thing, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so on... This is one of the issues that does exist with Wayland right now. So on Wayland, there was this sort of heavy emphasis on security from the start, and there wasn't much thought put into some of this very useful functionality that's kind of always existed on, on computers. And there's a lot of initial development on Wayland where the people who were designing the early protocols, they thought about their own use cases and then never really thought about how other people use their systems. So there's kind of been 17 years of trying to backtrack some of those really bad initial design decisions. I don't know about this. I'm assuming it only works in X11, which I guess is kind of annoying for you. Let's see.
Yeah, because that's the reason why I switched to Kanata so that it's compatible with Linux, but yeah. I'm not sure.
Let's see. I see a report. Did someone fix it? I'm not sure if this, because I saw a report saying it doesn't work on Wayland, and then I saw a fix saying it does work on Wayland. I'm not certain. I would, especially if you want to make use of that, I would recommend doing a bit of digging around to see if it actually does work on Wayland. Otherwise, you could always use i3 on X11, and which kind of creates an interesting situation where a lot of people are trying to move away from X11 right now. If you're doing it on Arch, Arch is going to have the software available forever. But, if you want to use the new Wayland thing that everyone's using, it does create a problem.
Oh, okay. I'll take a look. I was not aware because I thought, okay, so the keyboard mapper has nothing to do with the window manager, but it seems that
most window managers have a keyboard mapper built into them because of this problem. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like to keep it separate. I like to keep my
on X11 you could. On X11 I used to use something called SXHKD, where it's just it's basically the same thing as Kanata. Yeah. So that I felt the exact same way, especially I I used to do a lot of switching between window managers. So I could just
Mhm.
have that running in the background. I could go from i3 to BSPWM to DWM. And the only thing I need to change are the window manager specific things like, swapping between how the windows are placed, things like that. Stuff that is not generically controlled.
Yeah, that's that's the way that I have been doing it so far. My mapper is completely separate from my window manager. Aerospace does give you that option to configure key maps,
Mm.
but I don't use them, and it hasn't interfered with Canada. I think I haven't given it a try, but I'll see. Good to know that I have to keep that in mind when trying out Linux. Has to
Mhm.
be one of the first steps, I guess, trying out Canada and see how it works with Linux.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, if you're on the X11 side, it appears to work perfectly. Wayland, I wish I had an answer for you. There might be other ones that are similar, but I can't really say. And then it's a matter of whether they work consistently as well, or yeah. Um, yeah. Fun times. This is
Yeah.
the fun times of wanting to try out Linux in the middle of sort of this transitionary tech period where if you are on Linux and you know how all of this stuff sort of fits together and you do things in a Linux way from the start, it's not really a problem. But if you're someone new coming into it and you want to try things out, there's a lot of sort of misleading information about the current state of things.
Yeah, I would have been like, but why is this not working? In case that it doesn't work, right?
Mhm.
But now I know, okay, if it doesn't work, it could be because of the window manager. But if you wouldn't have told me, I would be like, but what's happening?
Yeah.
Really confusing, but yeah. Okay, makes
Yeah.
sense.
But by the sounds of it, everything that you want to do with Kanata anyway, you could configure in Hyperland. Like it has a hotkey system. You can configure the hotkey to just go and run that Python script, and then it will go and do whatever you need it to do. Yeah, like it basically does everything that you want this tool to do anyway. It's just if you then want to move
Mm,
to something
yeah,
else, you want to try out Sway, then you got to move everything over to that one as well. And yeah,
yeah. Or I'll be using both of them, macOS and Linux. And
mm,
if I want to switch to macOS, I'll have a configuration for Hyperland, another configuration for Canada, and I don't want to manage two configs. If
right,
I
right, right.
modify a script, a key map in Canada, I will have to modify it in Hyperland, and that's not something fun, actually. Not difficult, but not fun.
Hmm. Well, I guess you don't have to worry about modifying your scripts because if you modify the file and you're calling the file in both of them, it's still going to point to the same
Yep.
thing. So I guess you could. It's not a great solution, but you could abstract a lot of things out into scripts so you don't really have to think about it changing. It's not a great solution, but it will kind of do the job.
It's an option, yeah, yeah. We'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, once you like if you get to a point where you're kind of happy on one thing, it stops being a problem. But also it does make it kind of annoying. Like I want to try more things out, but every time I think about trying something out, I'm just like, ugh, I don't want to
Oh
reconfigure
man.
everything.
This happened to me with Canada. Everyone kept talking about Canada. I use Carabiner and I have used Carabiner for like a year and it's wonderful. I execute scripts from Carabiner with key maps. Everything that I did in Canada, I did it in Carabiner, right?
Mhm.
And everyone was like, but you should try Canada, Canada. And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but I know that it's gonna take me like a month. And I have been playing around because I'm not just going to do something simple, basic, and just leave it there. No, I don't know. I don't know if it's a problem or what, but
Mhm.
I just wanted to work the exact way that I wanted to work and be stable. And I have been playing with Canada for, I don't know, like a month
Mhm.
now. It has been really painful. I have wasted a lot of time. So every time that I have to try something new, I think about it. I'm like, aerospace, I was like, man, I know it's gonna take me, you know, a couple days or
Mhm.
weeks maybe. So I just talked to someone in Discord. helped me out through the process, so that made it way faster. But yeah, agree 100% with that. When I need to try something new, I think about it because it's a lot of time involved usually.
Yeah. This is why when there are bars built into a window manager, I don't use them. I will stick with the bar that I have. So my way bar, it's going to work across everything. Maybe I need to change out the one thing that might break is the like workspace number system, because usually that has to hook into like whatever that window manager is specifically doing, but most bars are going to have a module for that. So it's like change from the Neri workspace module to the Sway workspace module, and everything else stays the same. Like all of my configurations the same. That's a lot less of a migration there. Same thing I was doing over on the X11 side. I would just use the same bar everywhere, and I just don't really change it that much. There's people on Linux who are very into changing their entire desktop look every couple of months, and I don't know, for me, I just get very comfortable. And this is my other problem with when I swap to something. I end up just turning whatever I swap to into the thing I was already using. Like nothing, at the end of the day, nothing actually changes.
Yeah, definitely the same with me. And do you know, like, is there a reason, maybe, or you have an idea, like, why stuff is moving away from being modular to like having like a single solution, like you said right now, right? Wayland, I keep messing terms up, but you mentioned Wayland and other stuff. But you mentioned that Wayland has this bar built in already. Like, I guess they want more compatibility with their stuff, so that's why they implement.
Sorry, I think you're a bit confused there. Wayland doesn't have a bar built in. Some of the window managers have bars built in. Yeah, Wayland is the protocol set used to build the environment. I'm not sure where I might have said something which kind of crossed some words there.
Oh, but there's a window manager that has a bar built in?
Yes. There are some that do have their own custom bar solutions, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I don't know, I just like things to be modular,
I get it, yeah.
Each thing is its own thing, and you can make them talk to each other, that's fine, but I'm not in favor of just, grabbing a lot of stuff and making it one, because it removes a lot of flexibility for the user, right?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Yeah, I'm not going to make things modular to the point of making my life inconvenient, but in cases where I think there is some added value there, I will prefer it to be modular. Like, if I could have my hotkeys separate to my window manager, I would have them separate. It was so nice to have. It was very convenient. It's annoying not to have anymore, but I have learned to live with it.
So you're locked into that window manager, right?
Yeah.
For now.
Well, what I realized every time I swap to a new window manager, especially if I've been using it for, 6 months, a year, I add a bunch of hotkeys that I just never remember I ever added, and end up having to... I go back through my hotkey system, and it's kind of like I do a spring cleaning every so often. I'm like, ooh, do I need this one? I don't need that one. No, let's just get rid of that. And I end up having a much more streamlined configuration anyway. So, yeah, it's not a great solution, but there are still some benefits to come out of it.
Oh, it's like a cleanup phase.
Yeah, exactly.
I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, have you always been like a macOS user? Were you a Windows user at some point in your life? Have you just always used a Mac? Like, how have you sort of got to where you are now?
No, I was a Windows user all the time, like most of us are. I guess I don't know if you were a Windows user at some point, but yeah, Windows when I was a kid, that's what I used for quite a long time, all my life basically, until I joined the previous company that I was in, which is Log Me In. They were like the owners of LastPass and Hamachi
Oh,
and
I haven't
GoToMeeting.
heard the name Log
Some
Me In in
some
a long time.
yeah. Well, they changed their name. It's GoTo right now.
Mhm,
GoTo mentioned they better sponsor me. But when I joined there as a what was it, like a field engineer? I used to do a lot of networking stuff. Then I was in the NOC team, like an SRE type of thing. So you get a Mac, right? In other positions, you don't get a Mac. They give you just a Windows. If you're like in customer service and all that stuff, you just get a regular Windows computer.
mhm.
But if you're in other positions like Devi type of stuff, or if you're gonna be dealing with infrastructure, you usually get a Mac. So that's how I got a Mac. And those were the Intel based Macs. I hated it because it was hot. It was
Uh-huh.
really hot. The keyboard used to get really hot. The fan used to turn on sometimes. I don't think Intel Macs were good at all. I hate Intel Macs, to be honest. Yeah, no, I wouldn't get an Intel MacBook at all.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
But since I started using that computer there, I just learned Mac.
mhm,
It's difficult when you first start with Mac, as things are really different,
mhm,
the
mhm,
desktops and all that stuff, and then the magic mouse and the apps like this and going down. But that's how it all got started. And then uh, I cannot go back to Windows. Unix, I can go into the terminal, type all of the commands. I did a lot of stuff with servers,
mhm, mhm,
so I like that. I like that if I jump into a server, everything is gonna be exactly the same,
mhm,
and
mhm.
macOS is the same. On the other hand, if I'm on Windows, it's like, what is this crap? Like it's a completely different environment.
Right.
Commands are not the same. I have to install WSL, if I want to make something. But guess what? The job that I'm on right now, I'm using a Windows computer,
Mm.
and I'm using Secure CRT, which is like a terminal, no TMUX, no WSL. So, you know, that's the way life is. That's the way life is.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's how it all got started with the previous job. That's how I knew Mac. I loved it, and that's where I'm on right now.
I used to, so I started computing on Windows. The first system I ever used, I want to say we didn't. It wasn't my family computer, but I knew someone that had a Windows 98 system. I want to say, um, my original school, they had XP systems, so that was like the main computers I had used at the time. We didn't get a family computer until Vista. My parents, they grew up in like a farming background. They didn't know anything about computers. We didn't have an internet connection until 2007, something around that range, 2006. Um, I did use a Mac for quite a long time. My high school, we had MacBooks. So I used one from there up until I want to say maybe I was like 19 or 20 or so. So I used a Mac for quite a long time, and I haven't used one since then. But when I went from Windows to Mac, I do agree that the transition was weird. It felt very, like, it felt familiar in a way, but different enough where something just felt kinda off. But over time, I got used to it, and I just, when I eventually did go back to Windows for maybe a year or so, I just did not like it. The only reason I went back to Windows is at the time I wasn't using Linux, but my university, their options at the time were Windows, or like Windows and Mac were the main things they supported, and I didn't have the money for a new Mac because I had the same MacBook Pro for about 8 years at that point, and it was starting to get a little bit difficult to do stuff, and it was an Intel Mac from 2012 or something like that. So like it ran pretty hot. It wasn't a great experience. So I went back to Windows for a bit, and it wasn't great. Eventually, I saw one of my professors. I think it was in my Android development class. Actually, he was using. I think it was i3. Yeah, he was using the i3 window manager on Arch Linux, and I thought it was so weird and so cool, and I kind of just wanted to work out what this thing was myself, and that's how I eventually made my way into Linux. I just delved headfirst I think it was in like the third week of a semester, which is the worst time you could ever change your operating system. Don't recommend doing that. I had assignments due in like 3 weeks from that point, and I had to work out how a whole new operating system worked. But trial by fire, I guess. I kind of had to learn as quickly as possible, and I guess learn I did.
Yeah, Linux is tough. I played around with Linux as well. I don't know. Let me think. Maybe like 18 years ago. It was
Okay.
the university. I installed Ubuntu. I met a guy and he was like, "Oh, Ubuntu." Then they send you the disk to your house and the physical disk. And I was like, and it's free. And I was like, but what's the point? And I installed it in my computer. I dual booted Windows and Ubuntu.
Mhm.
And I remember having audio issues. I don't know. I don't remember the name of the program to play music. And I had to go into the terminal and was like, what the is this? You know?
Yeah.
Um, and I remember that the cube, right? You could move desktops,
Oh, yes.
switch
Okay, it
between desktops.
definitely was during. Yeah, okay. So what did you say? Did you say 17 years ago?
I would say around 17 years ago.
That
Yeah,
makes a lot
17,
of
something like
sense.
that.
Yeah. So the cube, that was a thing called Compiz, and that's where like burning windows came from, and wobbly windows, and all of the. If you go back and look at like, Linux videos from 2006 on YouTube, everybody was running stuff like that. Like that's kind of what the selling point of Linux was at the time.
Yeah, and it runs faster. And I remember, okay, it runs faster. But I remember about audio issues, and I was like, had to go into the terminal, paste in some commands, and I was like, I don't know. I just left it there. Didn't continue. Moved back to Windows.
Mhm.
But yeah, I did have my adventure with Ubuntu back in the day.
Mhm.
Now I use it only on servers, right? Debian is my server of choice. I install all of my servers run Debian. I know Ubuntu is what has most of the documentation, more support, and all that. But I thought, like, why Ubuntu? I'll just go to the source and I'll just use Debian. Has worked great
Mhm.
ever since. But yeah, I do play around with Linux still a lot, but only in servers. No
Yeah.
desktop environment at all. Just managing stuff that way.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess the fact that you're in a fairly good position to be trying out Linux because you're not trying it from like a blank slate, right? You use macOS in a very Linux-like way. You make use of a lot of Linux software. You're comfortable on the command line because you have that server experience. So, like, you might sort of you may not like the initial experience you get with some of the window managers you try, but it's not like you're going to be entirely lost on how that sort of interaction model works, right? Like a lot of people get tripped up with Linux where they're just not really comfortable using a terminal, not really comfortable using the command line, and they just sort of freak out with that, and like they don't really know how to read documentation and solve problems for themselves. But having that background there, like when I started using Linux, I was coming from a developer background. I was going through my software engineering degree at the time, so I was in the right mindset to try out Linux.
Mm. And that's a question that I have for you as well. Like, if I won't, that's what I've been thinking. I'm not gonna watch videos on how to install Arch
Mm.
because I want to go to the source. I always want to go to the source. If I need to install something, I always like going directly to the documentation. So would you say the Arch Wiki would be a good place to start, or
Yes.
what is your advice there?
The Arch Wiki is basically the official installation guide on how to install Arch. If there are absolutely videos out there which will guide you through the steps and maybe some additional things you might want to do, but the Arch Linux install guide on the Arch Wiki is like that's the source of how to install Arch.
And does it cover? Because I'll reach a point in which I won't have a desktop. I guess it will ask me like, but does the documentation give you options like, okay, do you want to go with X11? Do you want to go with Wayland? Like, or that's something that you have to figure out on your own somewhere else completely separately?
I haven't looked at the docs in a while. Let me see where it ends you off at.
Or do you have to choose before you install Arch? Okay, this is the window manager that I will use, or...
So when you go through the Arch install guide, it's quite a manual installation process. Unlike something like like Ubuntu has. Does the I haven't installed Ubuntu on Debian. You're using Debian on the server. When you do Debian on a server, is there there's like a
GUI?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
But I have to do the steps manually, right? Like partitions. Do I want to keep a swap partition, no swap partition, and all that stuff? Like that's what I use in Debian.
Yeah. So with Arch, basically, you're gonna mount the ISO and then pretty much go through a bunch of manual steps to set things up, like setting up what's some random thing in here, like setting up your internet connection, setting up your time and date, doing your disk partitioning, things like that. I would recommend just having a read, even if you're not installing Arch at the time, just having a bit of a read through the Arch install guide, just to get yourself sort of familiar with the steps it wants you to go through, and then sort of bring it up as you want to install it. So you're not going into the install guide entirely blind. So if there's anything in here maybe you don't understand, you can check it before you actually try to install it yourself. But once you've finished through the install guide, basically you're going to be at a point where you are just at the command line. It doesn't get you to install. There's a link at the end of the install guide for things you might want to additionally do, like, install your graphical environment, things like that. But basically, it's going to put you at a point where it's suitable to be running on a server, and that's basically it. Everything else, Arch is kind of intended to be for people who know what they're already doing on Linux and have an idea of the direction they want to go. It gives you a very clean system to begin with, and just lets you go wild with whatever you want to do.
Oh, so you don't get a desktop or anything. You just end up in the terminal and you go from there. I have installed in Linux. I have tried before ChatGPT and all that stuff, installing a graphical user interface in Linux servers. It's not complicated, but I didn't know that there was a way. There's like a menu that you can, I don't remember then, sell something, right? In which you can install like a graphical interface on servers, but I did it the manual way a long time ago. I don't remember. It was so long ago.
Yeah,
but,
I don't know. I haven't played with a Debian server in quite a while, so I have it. My website is hosted on a Debian server, but I kind of just have it there and I just don't touch it.
Yeah. Okay. So I just end up in the terminal and I go from there, basically.
Yeah. And then if you want to install, let's say you wanted to install Sway, for example, it's just one command. You just use, on Arch Linux, the package manager is pacman. So you would just do sudo pacman and then Sway. And then if that's all you want, you're basically good there. You have the environment.
Oh, and I have a question as well. What if you mess something up, or you want to nuke it, right? And you want to recreate the whole stuff. I have heard about a script, Arch install script or something. Is that something that you should give a try to?
Yeah, so if you... Okay, so when I said the way you install Arch is a fairly manual way, there is also the option of using the Arch install script, which is something included in the like Arch image. So when you mount that image, basically you have the option of going through the manual steps or just running Arch install straight off the start, and that gives you a terminal like installer. So it will let you go, oh, I want to set my time and date up, want to set this up, set that up. It's basically just a simple interface where you can just have it do everything for you. So if you want to have a less manual approach, that's definitely a way you can do it as well.
Oh, but they call you Rust a furry if you do that. Like,
I don't think they're going to call you a furry for doing that.
I watch videos and I don't know. There's something going on with using the install script. Like you're less of a man if you do it. Is that right?
There's definitely people that have this like ego thing about doing things manually. Some of it's a joke. Other people do take it a bit seriously. At the end of the day, right, like what I always say is it's your computer, and you know, I don't have any say on what you want to do. I might have recommendations on things that I think are a better choice, but at the end of the day, whatever you think is the best way to approach it, just go and do that, right?
Yeah, I'm 37 already, so I already lived not long enough. I already lived, and I'm just not into starting, from scratch and, and gathering all the stones and sticks and doing. No, if I can simplify my life, I'll do it, because
Yeah, I think
we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it's if you're not really, you said you're going to do it on a separate system, right? Like okay. So if you do make a mistake, do something like, you're not going to lose any data by accidentally overriding a drive. I do recommend to anyone who is trying to install a Linux distro for the first time, if you're not fully comfortable, just unplug the drives that you definitely don't want to wipe, and you just avoid any problems.
Yeah, in case that you don't know which drive you're going to install it, let's say you choose the wrong drive at the time of installation, right?
I did that with my first Arch install where I wiped... My initial plan with Linux was to dual boot Windows and Linux. I accidentally wiped the Windows drive. So the dual booting didn't happen. I just went straight into Linux.
Yeah, has happened to me as well, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously if you want to use something even more streamlined to install it than Arches, obviously, most distros have like a click next to install it, like installer, like Ubuntu, Debian, pretty much everything. You can just like click next and it just does everything for you. So again, it kind of depends on where you want to go. Obviously you said you were interested in doing the Arch stuff, so there's kind of, again, it depends on what you're looking to do.
I like scripting a lot, like in my macOS computer, right? I run a script when I deploy a new Mac, right? I don't do it often, right? But I have a script that runs through the entire process. It installs Homebrew, then it installs all the apps that it needs. It clones my .dot files. It gets all of my configuration from the .dot files, sources them, and I just get everything installed. So I'm a big fan of that. So I will definitely do that in Linux. So I think the install script, can I customize it?
You can. You can. There's like it's got like a Python API where you can set it up to do all of that stuff. But I was just thinking, there is an entire Linux distro based around scripting your setup and making it very easy to deploy. I don't know if you've heard of it yet, because they're going to find you if you talk about this. It's a distro called NixOS, where...
Yeah, I have heard, but I'm not trying it.
Yeah, because what you're suggesting is exactly the benefit of NixOS that people will try to sell you on as quickly as possible.
I was thinking about Nix, and I watched a video about, I don't remember the guy's name, Forrest something, and he just said Nix OS is not for me. He released a video like Forrest Knight. What is his name? Let me see what
That
his name is.
rings a
Let me see.
bell.
Forrest Nix. I'm just searching here. Forrest Nix. Yeah, Forrest Knight.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Nix OS. I failed you. Maybe next time. I watched that video. He's not a noob, we could say, right? He's advanced. He knows a lot of stuff.
Mm-mm-mm.
And I was thinking Nix because of the benefits that you get as well, because you can replicate your system. How often do you do that anyway, right?
Exactly.
So once every, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years. So is it really worth it? No, I'm not doing that. But I do want to have a script, not something complicated, that just installs, that is basically gonna do the stuff that I do manually, programmatically, right?
Well,
Do
there
it.
are more modular ways you can do it that are not necessarily tied to one system that also can do a lot of that stuff as well. So maybe something like that would be more, more up your alley.
Okay, okay, but that's through an install script in Arch, or
So the Arch install script is mainly about getting your like initial system set up. I've not really looked at how much you can do with it. So I'm
Mm,
honestly not the best person to really comment on how much can be done there. I know that
okay, but
it can definitely be done like set up to automate the installation of all of your software. Like when it comes
mhm.
to installing all of your dot files to where they need to go, I'm not sure if you can do that directly with Arch install.
But
Um,
if I'm left in a terminal, I can create something in my dots that I can call, like arch.linkarzu.com or something, right? A command that
mm.
I can run and it's gonna do everything. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can go from there, right? After installing Arch, I can go from there and
Yeah, you can
okay.
always set up your own post install stuff if you wanted to. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Okay.
There is a section on scripting your own installation in the Arch install GitHub. So I'd recommend just having a read through that and seeing what that lets you do just with that script by itself.
Okay. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, I think I last installed my system. I don't even think the Arch install script existed when I last did my system. Yeah, because it was only
Yeah.
added maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, and I think the system is like maybe 4 or 5 years old. I don't. I
Yeah.
am not the kind of person who swaps Linux distros or does reinstalls, anything like that. I've been on Arch since I started. For me, like I see people jumping between Linux distros trying to find different things that they like about different ones, but I started on Arch, so I'm just like. I know people that work on different distros, and every so often they try to sell me on the merits of whatever they're using or whatever they're personally working on. Like I know some Fedora developers and Ubuntu developers. I'm just like, yeah, but whatever I do on that distro, I can just do on Arch anyway.
Yeah. Same here. I'm not going to be distro hopping. Well, maybe I get like a midlife crisis and I start doing that, at this age. So, but
Well, you can
no,
always
I
go to
just
Gen
like,
2 and waste a lot of time over there.
no, 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 no. Maybe when I retire, when I'm older. But how often do you really run the install script, right? The only reason the last time that I installed it on my Mac
Mm,
that I ran the script is when I got this MacBook, right? Which
mm,
was like, I don't know, 4 months ago. I expect to keep this computer for 3, 4 more years or more if possible.
mm,
And then I will need to run the script again,
mm,
right?
mm.
So I don't think it's worth it for me
Right.
to try Nix at this point. Yeah.
No, I get that. I get that. I do think people sort of oversell the value, I get it if you are trying out a bunch of different systems, but when you're a single system person and you're telling me like how great it is for redeployment, like have you ever redeployed, right? Like, yeah, it's cool that you can, but have you ever done so?
Yeah, we over prepare. That's what happens. Yep.
So you mentioned a couple of times using NeoVim. I have never properly learnt it myself. Every so often, I've kind of done the same thing you did, where it's like I sit down and try to properly learn it, and I never really got around to doing so. I use it as like my editor for modifying config files and things like that. I've just never really gotten comfortable enough to, want to do programming or anything really substantial in it.
Mm, yeah. Was because of Prime, right? Before that, I'm not a programmer. I'm more on the infrastructure side of things. I'm more on the Kubernetes, Docker side of things, and all of that. But I do know a little bit of Bash because I have to use Bash, especially with AI nowadays. I do know the programming basics, so I can tell what's right and what's wrong. If I don't know a language, I use AI to help me and I correct it and all that stuff, right? But I was doing scripting in MikroTik routers, right? Because I have two ISPs in my house. So I needed to create a script in MikroTik before AI was a thing. And I did it in VS Code, right? I used VS Code all the time. So I created a lot of scripts for my MikroTik router back then. And when I started watching Prime, I was like, okay, VS Code, I did that, everything there. And I started playing around with NeoVim because of Prime, and I was like, I cannot do this in NeoVim, because you're crippled basically, right? You open NeoVim and you try to navigate, and it's like just to go up and down, left or right. It's really painful. It's horrible, to be honest. I don't know why we do it, but like I said at the beginning of the call, right? This is not gonna defeat me because I used Vim in servers, right? If you jump into a server and you need to modify a configuration file, you have two options: Nano or Vim, right? I used Nano for a long time, and I was like, Nano, but then you hear the jokes that Nano is for furries, right? So I just wanted to use Vim properly, right? And I don't know. I started with notes with Markdown because I write a lot of Markdown. I write a lot of notes. I used Obsidian back in the day, for my note taking. And I decided, okay, I'll start with notes. And once you go into that rabbit hole, man. But I started with the distribution, the lazy Vim distribution.
I was gonna ask how you handle your Vim configuration, if you built something from scratch or used something that existed already.
Yeah, I'm not gonna have a better configuration than what Folky has. Folky is a pretty popular guy in NeoVim. He creates a lot of plugins. According to my personal opinion, the best. Well, no, Folky and Echasnovsky, those are two guys. Well, and a lot of other guys. I don't want to disrespect other folks, but Folky has this distribution called LazyVim. It's not gonna get better than that. I will not be able to come up with the ideas because he switches between NeoVim. He tries Helix. He tries other editors, Emacs. So he has a lot of cool ideas, right? So that's what I use. And if I create my own config in the long run, I will just try to mirror his configuration. So I'm just using LazyVim at the moment. That's the distro that I use. I'm planning to try in my own config as well. I will come up with something, but for now, LazyVim. I do have my own. It's really customized LazyVim distribution, which is in my .files. I have the instructions there to install it and all that stuff. But yeah, that's what I use.
Yeah, the problem I've always found with any of these Vim distributions, same thing happened when I tried a couple of Emacs ones as well, is I don't know. It's kind of like you're not even using Vim to an extent, right? Because you're using it's so heavily configured on top of it, where unless you understand the core basics of Vim, you don't really know what is part of Vim and what's part of the distribution. And I don't know. I think there is some, I definitely think there is some merit in building something up from scratch, even if you do end up using a distribution, just so you sort of have an understanding of, I guess, how the pieces fit together. I don't know. I've always been the kind. Maybe it's coming from a developer mindset, but I always like to know how things work.
Yeah, and that's a really good point there because it was really difficult when I started with LazyVim because it's a completely new world, right?
Mm,
It's
mm,
like, what the hell is all this? Talks about LSPs, plugins, configuration files. How do they talk to each other? A lot of key maps, right? LSP has LazyVim has a lot of defaults, like hundreds of key maps, and you're like, so yeah, uh, it is really difficult.
mm,
Using a distribution is not simple. I would say it's the quickest, but it's really difficult because you have to learn all of the intricacies, we could say, and all of the small details about the distribution. And trying to modify something from a distribution, man, it's like you want to be specific. And I can do that right now, but it took me a long time to be
mm,
able to modify. I can modify it to my liking right now, everything. But at the beginning, if I wanted to modify the simplest thing from that distribution, it was really painful. So
mm,
I don't know what to recommend to people where to start, because you can start from the beginning, create your own config. That's
mm,
going to take you a long time. It's going to look ugly. It's not going to be useful too much. Or you can go with something like more VS Codey,
mm,
we could say, because
mm.
it's basically like that, built in a lot of stuff. Um, but yeah, it's complex, a complex topic.
Yeah, it's the same reason I often recommend that people don't use things like Oh My ZSH for the ZSH shell, and instead just start from the shell itself and then add in the things you kind of want to it. Because when you use Oh My ZSH, it comes with lots of aliases and lots of stuff pre-configured, and that's great, right? But at the same time, especially if you're in a situation where you might have to, SSH into systems. I think it's actually a big thing with Vim. If you're in a situation where you have to SSH into systems, knowing what is part of Vim and what's not part of Vim, like if you go from lazy Vim and you've only used that to a clean version of Vim, like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
yeah. It's
very, very different.
yeah, it is 100% different. That is absolutely right. That's something that I've been wanting to do as well.
Mm.
Using NeoVim as your um, client, we could say, and you remote into a server directly from NeoVim because there's some plugins like remote.nvim, I think is one of them. I haven't tested. Oil.nvim allows you to remote into servers and modify files so you can use your own config. But
Ooh.
I haven't taken the time to properly go through it and set up a video in which I go, okay, so these are the options for SSH if you want to use your own NeoVim config, right? But
Mm.
there are some options. I cannot tell you which one is the best one because I haven't tried them,
Mm.
but yeah, that is completely right.
Mm.
If you go to a server and you're stuck with plain old NeoVim or Vim, actually, it's like, oh, there's a few key
Or even
maps that I
worse, you're
don't
stuck
have
with
here.
Vi in some cases.
Yeah, with Vi, yeah. So that's the thing. So depending on your work, I guess, if you don't work with servers, it's fine. But if
Yeah,
you work
yeah.
with servers, something you need to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, again, it kind of depends on sort of what your workflow is and where. Like, again, it's like the NixOS thing, right? If you only use a single system, you can get away with not really having a good deployment system if you have a lot of systems. Maybe you want something. And if you use a lot of systems, maybe you don't want to rely on something where your entire workflow is tied to a bunch of additional plugins rather than the core functionality of the environment itself, right? Like, um, I know a developer. I don't know if he does this to troll people or he just likes pain. Um, he writes code without any code highlighting and without any auto completion in Vim. I he writes C code like this. I don't know why. I don't know why he does this. It looks unpleasant. Um, I know he does definitely do some stuff to mess with people though, because there is a monospace version of Comic Sans that I've seen him use from time to time. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. I think this guy, Mitchell, the creator of Ghosty, also doesn't like to use LSPs and all that stuff. I don't remember. I think I saw it in an interview. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, we're used to having our hand held, right? So I like to be guided. I like to be told, hey, I am a visual guy. I couldn't do that. And funny thing that you mentioned about Oh My CSH, that's actually the way that I found your videos many, many years ago. Because I was playing with with Oh My CSH, right? Because that's what you're told, right? Oh My CSH, I installed it.
Yeah,
and I
OMA
noticed
CSH is the only way to
immediately.
make CSH useful, is what I remember hearing all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Yeah, and I noticed that it made my terminal slower. Right now, my terminal is lower. When I bring up my shell prompt, it's slower. But because I do a lot of background checks and I do a lot of stuff in there, and it's intentional, right? I did it. I know why it's happening, and I'm fine with it, right? But when I installed on my CSH, I noticed that small lag, like a second, when I opened it up, and I was like, "What the hell is happening here?" So I dug in Google. YouTube actually on my CSH, whatever, your video showed up, and I was like,
God,
and it was pretty, uh, what, verbose. Don't use on my CSH
yeah, it's
because
not a
it's
good.
just
It's
like
an awful video. I need. I I saw someone reference that video in I think they were doing a talk in front of like a big audience about ZSH, and like my thumbnail was just giant on their presentation. It's like, that's such a bad video. I kind of want to go back and remake it. But hey, I'm glad
no,
you
but I think
got you. I'm glad you got
I think
something out of
it's
it.
yeah, I think it was a really good point, and I was like, because you're confused, and I was like, but what is on my CSH? And I was like, okay, so I have not a lot of idea about terminal tools and all that stuff. I was like, what is it then, and why is it slowing me down? I uninstalled it. I installed Starship, which is I configure Starship to my liking, configure my CSH RC file to the way that I specifically want, my history, scrolling, all that stuff. So yeah, it's a good option, but I don't use it, and I wouldn't recommend it either at this point, to be honest. Depending, right? If you want something out of the box, could be, but I personally wouldn't use it.
Honestly, my main reason for not recommending OMZSH is like it's kind of the aliases, right? I think that the value of aliases is you understand what they are. They're shortcuts that make sense to you. If you're just given a bunch of someone else's aliases, at least for me personally, they don't stick as much, and I kind of just ignore them and never use them.
Yep, same here.
So, one thing I did want to talk about is you make use of a split keyboard.
Yep, a split keyboard. I don't know if you can see it. Let's see. I cannot see myself.
There we go.
Yep.
I've never really I've tried them, but it's never really clicked with me.
No, why not?
I don't know. I think it's kind of that I have I think part of it is I have bad typing habits. I was never really taught proper typing form, so the way that I press the keys and the way that I use my fingers doesn't actually, make sense on like how you should use a keyboard. And I think a lot of that comes down to like bad habits that have been developed from playing like games on PC, right? Like primarily I'm typing with my left hand because my other hand's going to be on the mouse. So my habits for using a keyboard they're not typing habits is the best way to put it.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I didn't want to go with the split keyboard. I just did it because I had to, because I love the Apple's keyboard. It's
Mm.
the Magic keyboard is what it's called. It's
Uh,
a pretty low profile keyboard. It's really soft, for furry hands, right? If you're a furry, you definitely love that keyboard because I could type really fast in that keyboard, man, and it didn't get in the way. I don't know. I loved it,
uh, uh,
but my hands were crammed like this the whole
mm,
time. I don't know if you can see it there, like this.
mm.
So this part of my arm started to hurt, the forearm, and it was pretty painful actually. And I was worried, and I was like, "Why is this happening?" I was using Hyper a lot back then, and Hyper wasn't my pinky. I used Hyper for everything. Hyper A and to switch
Hyper?
applications, to switch Hyper, like the hyper key. The hyper key was escape in my case
What is the
back in the day.
hyper
Like,
kit? What is, wait,
oh, it's when you send the four modifiers, Control, Alt, Option, and Shift, right?
I've
It's not a
never,
macOS thing. It's
yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, yeah, I've never heard the word hyper key before.
oh, but yeah, it's just
Okay,
when you send them the four modifiers,
right.
Shift, Command, Control, Option at the same
Okay, okay.
time. I had caps lock modified as hyper. I was using
Mm,
it a lot, so that caused. I think that's part of what's caused the issue in my forearm.
mm.
So I started in, I don't know, figuring out what keyboard I should go with. If you look for ergonomic stuff, you're gonna find split keyboards, right? So
Mm.
I just had one chance. I couldn't go to my wife and tell her, I'm gonna buy this one first, and if I don't like it, I'm gonna buy another $400 keyboard. She would have said, just get out of the house, right?
Right, right,
Um,
right.
so that's why got the Glove 80. But now I have too many keys, right? Because it has 80 keys. Now the same thing that happened with the TV is happening with the Glove 80. If you look at the keys, let me just show you real quick. You're gonna see that some of them are blank, right? I'm only using 40 keys.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you can see it there or not, but
Yep, that's showing up just fine.
yeah. So on each half, instead of 40, because each half has 40 keys, I'm using 20 keys on each half, right? So
Right.
2020, I'm just using 40 keys, and I'm modifying my configuration in Canada to adjust to that. So
Mm-hmm.
the next step is to go with the Corn um, keyboard, which
Uh-huh.
only has 42 keys, right? So that's sort of where I'm at right now in the keyboard. The the idea was due to ergonomics. It did help, but now my fingers hurt a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what's happening, but I got softer switches like a week ago, and it has gotten way better.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to try a different keyboard. I guess
Mm.
once you go into that rabbit hole, I don't know, it's something else.
Right, right. I think for me, because I do play a lot of games, like it's just never really made any sense for me to really learn how to properly use a split keyboard. Because a split keyboard's just it's gonna feel really awkward for playing games on. I don't really want to have multiple keyboards.
Yeah, yeah. And if you don't have pain in your forearm or in your fingers,
Mm-hmm.
like I would say, why? And the adaptation period is tough. It's not easy, when
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
because these are the keys are vertical, right?
Mm.
The normal keyboards are staggered, right? So adapting to that, man, it is really painful. And then you have to adapt back to a normal keyboard, right? Because you get used to this one,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to relearn the other keyboard. But then eventually you learn both of them and you can
Mm.
switch between them. But first you have to adapt to the vertical one, then you have to adapt again to your own keyboard because it happens, but
Mm-hmm.
then you learn both.
Right, it's the same reason I haven't really ever gotten around to learning other keyboard layouts, right? There's people that are big fans of Workman and other things like that, Dvorak fans. I'm just like, it's sure, it's cool, but if my concern is, let's say I got really comfortable on Dvorak, and then you put me in front of a QWERTY keyboard again, I'm just gonna be like, Like, just
Yeah.
typing like I'm 900 years old and I've never seen a keyboard before.
Yeah, the Primogen uses the Dvorak, and
Mm.
it's one of the reasons why I considered maybe switching to an alternate keyboard layout.
Mm.
But I said it's been enough. That's where I drew the line, and I was like, no. And because of the exact same reason, right? Imagine I have to teach something to my daughter in a
Mm.
computer in a QWERTY keyboard. I couldn't do it. So no, I'm not doing that. Or everyone in the house, including my wife and daughter, switch to Dvorak, or I don't do it at all. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not gonna happen.
Right, and then, like, let's say you're using a laptop, right? You're not getting a laptop with a Dvorak keyboard, so you've got to either deal with QWERTY or carry around a keyboard when you want to use a laptop, and... No.
Yeah.
No.
No. No. No. I'm not in favor of other keyboard layouts. I don't think I will ever be. I don't think they make too much sense. If the pain is way too much, probably would be worth considering
Sure.
the Dvorak, but I would search for other alternatives before even thinking about switching the keyboard layout. That
Right.
would be like my last option.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, a split keyboard is definitely a lot less drastic of a solution, because at least it's still QWERTY. Like, the layout's gonna be it's gonna feel a bit different because your hands are spaced differently, but it's not like, oh, the keys are entirely in random different locations that don't align. Like, you can, I imagine the swap back from a split keyboard to a regular keyboard is considerably easier there. The audio just died. Discord, are you okay? Hold up. I don't know if that's me that died or you. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna leave the call, rejoin. Maybe Discord just did something weird. Hello. You're still silent, so it's definitely on your side. How does this happen? Why is Discord like this?
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
I just connected. I think it was my microphone. I just reconnected it. And what happened to my camera?
Camera.
Stopped working, right?
Yep, that didn't change.
Oh, it still works, my camera? Or
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll continue in the question you asked. Well, I don't know if you're ready.
No, you go ahead. I didn't stop the recording. I'll just cut that section out.
Yep. Okay. So you asked about if it was easy to go back to a regular keyboard, right? Yeah, so it is pretty simple to go back to my computer keyboard. And actually, I remapped the laptop keyboard so that all of the keys, so I only use 40 keys on the Mac keyboard using Kanata. I don't use the arrows. They're mapped to anything. Like the F keys and the number row, they are not mapped at all. So if I press those on my Mac keyboard, they don't do anything, because I want to have the same flow in my, Glove 80 as in the laptop keyboard itself. But yeah, once you get used to that adaptation period, switching from the Glove 80 back to the regular staggered keyboard, once you relearn that again, it's pretty simple. You learn both of them and you can switch between them quite easily.
Okay. I don't know. It's something I would definitely be... It's like... I would like to try it. There's a lot of things I would like to try. It's just a matter of... Am I willing to put the time into it, right? There's so many things out there where it's like, I would like to try this, But there's other things that are much higher priority that I would much rather spend my time on.
Oh yeah, and a keyboard is gonna take away a couple months of your time for sure, because you're gonna be remapping keys, you have to adjust keys, you will be switching them around. Just keep that in mind that you're gonna spend a couple months in a keyboard,
Yeah.
but can give you more content as well, right? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it gives me more content, but then also slows down writing scripts for the other content I want to do. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of happy with what I've got. Like the biggest change that I made is I have a 10 keyless. I don't have a number pad. that's as much change as I need in my life.
Oh, okay.
Because in my case, I do use the F keys. I do use the arrow keys. Like I want all that stuff to be there. It's nice. It's just something I don't know, I'm used to swapping between windows using the arrow. Like I use the Windows key and the arrow keys to swap between the different tiles I have on my screen. It's just I like that as an option.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems with this split keyboards, because arrows, you will not have arrows. Like in the Glove 80, for example, the arrows are down here in this bottom row. You have two arrows on this side, and the other two arrows are on the other half of the keyboard. So it's really difficult to get used to the arrows, so I just remove them completely. And it doesn't matter if I'm on the Glove 80 or if I'm on the Mac keyboard. To use my arrows, I just leave caps lock pressed, which is like my navigation layer. So I just leave caps lock pressed, and it's AJKL, right? Vim motions. Those are my arrows, right?
Right.
So Vim motions all the time in it. And the workflow is the same, the Glove 80 and the Mac computer, right? Or if I want to select stuff, like the way that you select stuff in Word, right? You want to select words to the back or words to the front. I use caps lock as well, but instead of HJKL, I use the keys on the top, which are YUIO or UIOP. I don't know those four keys, right? So to select stuff. So yeah, getting used to a split one and the arrows in different places is difficult. So I personally think that if you keep the same workflow in the two keyboards, it's just gonna make your life easier. But you will have to do a lot of remapping and a lot of stuff. So it's more work. But
Yeah.
I don't know, complicated. A lot of decisions you have to make.
Yeah, no, I think it's cool, right? As I said, I think it's cool, but it's just like I'm good. I will go and watch someone's video about why split keyboards are great, why Dvorak is great, and hey, I can live vicariously through their experience. I can spend 15 minutes learning about how great it is, and then never do it myself.
Yeah, you feel like you accomplished it, right?
Exactly.
I did it. Let's move on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd much rather focus on trying out new window managers and things like that. Things that like an area that the area that I'm willing to give myself some experimentation room for and just try new things out there.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason I don't like distro hopping as well. I don't like upending my entire system. Like I want to stay on Arch. I want to use the same software, but like I want to change out something, right? Like I want to change out like one thing which will disrupt my workflow a bit, but not enough where I need to relearn everything for an entire month. It's like it's mostly the same, but like it's enough of a change to be exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't like changes. I don't like changes. Well, my wife tells me that all the time, I tell her, yeah, I'm open to change, and she's like, you don't like change at all. So it seems that I don't like change at all. I like stuff to keep consistent, that's why I just keep macOS the way that I keep it. I just want it to work. I don't like to be modifying it a lot. I do it because of content sometimes, right?
Sure.
Like create my own NeoVim distribution or use Kickstart.nvim. That's something that I'm planning to do. Try Aerospace. I was not planning on installing Aerospace. I'm good with Yabai. I have been using Yabai. It works for me the exact way that I want it to work. But it's content. That's the only reason why I, try other things nowadays most of the time. But if I wouldn't be doing content, I would stick to Yabai, stick to the stuff that I know, and wouldn't change stuff around at all.
Sure. No, I definitely get that. I would definitely be a lot less experimental with stuff if I wasn't doing that. And I think for me, at least, it's been kind of good because it has a lot of the stuff I try out, I don't stick with, but some of the stuff I feel like it actually was a good thing to sit down and give it a shot because it did ultimately improve what I was doing.
Yeah.
So what made you want to make videos anyway? Because you could just not do that at all. Play around with your macOS system, do your regular job, and just not do this. What made you wanna make videos?
Because I noticed that there was a lot of content, all of the cool and nice content and all of the nice looking desktops or setups were Linux only, right? Windows, there's a few maybe out there that create good Windows videos. But there was not a lot of stuff related to macOS. Josh Medeski, that's the way that I learned about Yabai, because he had a video about Yabai. But there were some things that I had questions about and that I figured out on my own. So I was like, there's a lot of macOS content, but there's not a lot of applications, like the difference between this application and the other one, and Finder, and just stock stuff, boring stuff. I just wanted, to put out content there for the stuff that I discover, and that there's not a lot of documentation. There is READMEs in GitHub, right? But people don't like going into GitHub, going through a README configuration files. It's tough. So I just wanted to make it more accessible. And the end goal is to get some money. I'm just getting pennies, right? It's not. But that's like that's what keeps me going, that eventually it'll start, producing some money, and we'll see what happens. But yeah.
So you just felt like there was this, I guess, gap in the market. There wasn't really anyone making the sort of macOS content that you wanted to see out there.
Yeah, terminals, NeoVim, macOS, window managers in macOS, how to customize macOS like the real way. There were a few videos, but developers that create their product and they just share one single video, and you don't see them ever again, right? But they don't create more videos. They're developers, they're focused doing other stuff. Sometimes they share their setups in a single video every once in a lifetime. So I just wanted to have more content out there related to macOS, and making it look good and useful, because it's a useful operating system if you configure it the right way, and if you learn a lot about of the different stuff that is going on in macOS. It is actually quite useful, good for editing stuff, for video, it's awesome. But the default stock experience, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. This is not even macOS. I'm just using the hardware that Apple provides, and I like their Unix base, right? And I just built on top of that. So it's not like too much of a macOS computer anymore, basically.
Right, you basically have the Mac compatibility, but with a more Linux-like experience.
That is correct. Yep, exactly. Yep.
Which that does sound kind of compelling, right? I get it. Because there's a lot of like my Stream Deck here, right? Like the Elgato Stream Deck, it has software to work on Windows, has software to work on Mac. But on Linux, like you kind of got to rely on some third-party community implementation for it, and it works great. But it's not the official supported stuff. And that's what you get with a lot of pieces of hardware, where it has official support on Mac and Windows, and then you kind of got to hope that somebody out there has made a third party implementation, a third party configuration software. Like my Logitech, I got a couple of Logitech mice here. I got what is this? A G305. My main one's a G600. There's no Logitech configuration software on Linux, but people have made software to configure it, and it works great. But not every mouse brand has support for software and has third-party solutions, so you kind of got to think a bit more about what you're going to buy.
Oh yeah, you have to think about the equipment. Yeah, that is true. That's something that I like about it as well. It doesn't matter what I buy. I know that it's going to be available on Mac. I just bought a camera, like a webcam, 4K Chinese webcam. I got it yesterday. I wanted to give it a try. And it has the little tool that, it comes with, like to modify the color and stuff like that. Windows and macOS. I don't think I saw Linux in there, right? But yeah, so compatibility is something that I do like a lot. I did create music back in the day, and I do like a tool that macOS has for making music. It's called Logic Pro X. I have used a lot of other ones. I have used FL Studio. I used Pro Tools in Windows. I used Cubase and other ones. And man, to be honest with you, Logic Pro is, to me, on a different level. I do like that a lot. So I'm not making music right now, so that is not gonna make me stay on macOS.
Right.
But compatibility is a major one for me. But it's getting better in Linux, right? You just have to think about what you're gonna buy before you buy it and make sure that it's compatible.
Yeah. Yeah, and some areas have a lot better support than others. Like, you can, if you don't need to configure a mouse, like, the reason I configure this is it's an MMO mouse, so it's got a bunch of buttons on the side. But if you're just plugging a regular mouse in, right, it just has 2 buttons, has a scroll wheel. Literally everything's gonna work. It's just, if there's additional buttons on it, maybe there's not configuration software for it. Like the baseline stuff is all good. It's usually a lot of that stuff on top that may be a little bit, maybe not necessarily be there. And then there's just random areas where things work really well because there's just a hyper niche dedicated audience for it. I went on a random like research tangent looking at simulation racing, and all of the really popular like racing gear just works on Linux. There's a really dedicated community that has made sure all of the popular racing wheels just work. And I had no idea that anyone had even done this.
Yeah, the community is wonderful. They do a lot of stuff, right? So yeah, good community. A lot of projects that are created there and maintained. Yeah, I'm concerned a little bit about as well as what's gonna happen. Like, for example, with NeoVim, right? Volky is the one that manages or maintains NeoVim. What's gonna happen when he decides, I'm done with all these guys? They create issues and they ask a lot of dumb questions, and it happens a lot, right? And if you go to the repo, you're gonna find a lot of, man, he's really active and he closes a lot of issues. He's not sweet because he's just tired of it, right? Maintaining that and dealing with a lot of people is, I guess it must be exhausting. And I guess what's gonna happen when these like single maintainers just, I guess someone else is gonna take over, right? Is usually what happens. What have you seen that happens in those cases?
It really depends on the project. Like, some projects, they have a big audience behind them, and hopefully when someone... So there's a term called the bus factor, where basically it's how many people involved in a project could, suddenly be hit by a bus for the project to continue surviving. And there's a lot of projects out there where if one person's gone, there's no project, right? Like, there's one person developing it. Maybe a lot of people use it, but no one's really gotten involved in the project. Like, if you look at...
Like Tmux. Tmux, for example, I was looking at the commit history in Tmux. Nicholas is the main guy, maintaining Tmux. I guess there's another guy. I don't know if it's just a couple more guys, but Tmux, I think, is a project maintained by mainly a single person, if I'm not mistaken, which is Nicholas.
Where's the contributor history? There's six contributors on Tmux? Wait, 6 people? How in the world? What? I would have expected this to be way bigger.
Yeah, but look at the commit history.
Yeah.
You're gonna see NCIM, which is Nicholas. He's the most active one. The other ones, just a few commits here and there, right? And so it's only 2 basically, right? Nicholas and Thomas.
Yeah. Thomas a lot more in recent years, but like Tmux development kind of slowed down a lot. There used to be another person like 10 years ago who did a bit of work, but nowadays, yeah, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's a huge project that's extremely popular, right? Who doesn't use Tmux, right? And is someone gonna take over? Who knows, right?
I don't know. Well, considering how little work's kind of done on it nowadays, I'd imagine it generally considered feature complete.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other projects out there where they're fairly healthy projects, right? Like a great example, the Linux kernel. There's hundreds of people that write code for it every single day. If one person disappears, like maybe some subsystem doesn't really have the amount of work it needs, but the project as a whole is going to survive, right? Like that's a really, really healthy project. But I get curl's another great example that's like really, really important, and the majority of the work is done by one guy, and he's been doing it for the past 30 years.
Oh, so or similar to what happened to Vim, right? Like,
yeah.
Community took over, and it's still being maintained. I guess I don't use Vim too much nowadays, but yeah, I guess it continues to be developed, right?
Yeah. Like the majority of the work was being done by one guy, but like Vim at least had a big community around it. It's odd, right? Like I had no idea about Tmux. You would hope that people would come along and pick up a really big project after someone either dies, steps down, for any other reason has to leave a project. But there are a lot of cases where things kind of they just kind of stop at one point. Like no one picks it up, people move on, maybe there's other things that do a similar job, and I don't know, code bases just get left in the past sometimes.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't think Tmux, that would happen to Tmux, because way too many people use Tmux. I don't know what would happen. People would start a revolution or something if Tmux is not maintained anymore. A fork would come up quite quickly if you're not given access. If no one else is added there, to contribute, I guess a fork would start quite fast. And yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine.
That's the good thing about it, right? Forks and contributing, so yeah.
I think we should probably be ending off the episode sometime soon. We're coming up on the 2-hour mark.
Okay, yep.
So, let people know where they can find you.
Okay, so if you go to YouTube, you're gonna be able to find me there. I'm gonna share the link with you. I don't know if you leave it in the description or something, but yep, YouTube, and my blog post is linkarzu.com. All of my links are there in my blog post. So either or, I did have social media. I did have Twitter. I did have TikTok, Instagram. I just uninstalled everything, like, I don't know, a month ago, because I noticed that I was spending way too much time. I was switching between TikTok, and then I would switch to Twitter, then to Instagram, then back to Twitter, then to LinkedIn, then to the YouTube Studio app, and I spent like 4 or 5 hours doing that, and it was hell. So I just uninstalled all of them, including LinkedIn. I said, F them. I only have YouTube now,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I do, watch YouTube videos, because at least I feel that I'm learning something.
Right,
But
right, right.
yeah, but yeah, just go to my blog post and or my YouTube. There's links to my dot files.
Mm-hmm.
My dot files are pretty popular. They have like, I don't know, 800, almost 900 stars. I have a
Wow.
lot of stuff there. macOS and NeoVim related mostly, but all of the tools that I use.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. What do you have going on your channel right now? What do you got? What do you got coming out? I did see you have these videos on Apple containers that are currently marked as members first, mostly.
Yeah, they are catching up in Docker, because in Apple you couldn't run containers directly. You
Uh-huh.
had to install Docker Desktop or other tools like Podman or Kalima. Like in Linux, you just install Docker, you
Yeah,
run
yeah,
your
yeah.
containers, that's it, right? In Apple, you could not. You had to install third-party tool.
Uh-huh.
So 10, 15 years later, I don't know when containers started, they're catching up. Now you can run containers. There's limitations because you can only run them if you want two containers to communicate with them with each other. You cannot do it in macOS 15. You have to upgrade to the new macOS version, which is
Uh-huh.
26,
Uh-huh.
which is the glassy one. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Mhm.
Kanata, macOS 26 coming soon. NeoVim related stuff as well. Those are the main topics, macOS, NeoVim, terminals, stuff like that.
Awesome. Nothing else you want to mention, or?
No, I think if you get to my links, you'll be able to find everything there. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. So my main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. Sometimes I stream there as well, depending on how I feel. I've got the gaming channel, Brody on Games. I may have finished the stream games I'm doing right now. If not, I'd be playing through Kazan the First Berserker and Ori and the Blind Forest. If you want to see the video version of this, it is available on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. The audio version is on basically every podcast platform. There is an RSS feed as well. On Spotify, we have video, which is cool. Now, how do you want to sign off the show? What is your final word? What do you want to say?
I would say don't drink and don't do drugs, because I did it when I was way younger. I spent way too many years doing hardcore stuff. I'm sounding like an old man, and it's the end of the video anyway. Nobody's watching, but if there's someone out there watching and you're considering doing all that stuff, just don't do it. You're just going to waste your time. And that's it, Brody. Really appreciate you inviting me over. Really,
Absolute pleasure.
thank you, man.
Whenever I ask people to sign off the episode, I don't expect to hear an inspirational message. That's the first. We are 280 episodes in. You are the first person to do that.